The Case for the Ontology of Money as Credit. Money as Bearer or Basis of Value by Phil Armstrong and Kalim Siddiqui. The Marxian Commodity Variant Theory of Money. At this point, we might consider Marx's analysis of money, which is complex and does not fit neatly in with either the orthodox or heterodox approach discussed above. Marx saw the role of money as acting as a general equivalent, fulfilling a unique role. Brunhoff and Foley, 2007. And notes the importance credit money, although undeveloped in the second half of the 19th century when he was writing Capital, viewing the credit system as simply a form or development of a monetary economy. Marx emphasizes that money is embedded in the social relations underlying commodity exchange, and that money mediates between capital and labor, and also between financial and industrial capital. This gives money a crucial role in determining the way the contradictions embedded in social relations manifest themselves over time. Marx, 1981. Lapavitsas, 2003, notes that there are notable commonalities between the Marxist and post-Keynesian approaches, the latter drawing inspiration from state and credit theories. Marxian economics provides insights into the development of the monetary system under capitalism, and Marx's association with the perspective of the banking school and rejection of the claims of the currency school is an interesting case in point. Footnote 15. Marx agreed with banking school on its anti-quantity theory stance, but went beyond it in providing theoretical foundations for the view that determination runs from prices to money, not vice versa. Lapavitsas, 1994. End footnote. However, Lapavitsas and Ito, 1999, retain faith in a version of the commodity money story, albeit a different one to the Austrian school, and reject alternative theories which are based upon anthropology. Quote, Marx's analysis is incompatible with the anthropological claim that money was originally an ideal unit of account without a corporeal means of exchange. Insofar as past societies sought a unit of account to express the equivalence of disparate use values, they were forced to do so by their external relations. It is highly unlikely that economic relations among pre-capitalist societies rested on trust, mutual obligation, or reciprocity, requiring money only as an abstract numeraire. A corporeal money was also necessary to effect the exchange of commodities. Ito and Lapavitsas, 1999. End quote. In marked contrast to Ingham, 2004a, and Ray, 1998, Lapavitsas, 2003, concludes that the origins of money are to be found in commodity exchange, where foreignness is significant, especially between communities, and the belief that once money has been derived as a universal equivalent, its corrosive power, Ito and Lapavitsas, 1999, then permeates society, and, in the case of capitalism, becomes a dominant social relation. Lapavitsas, 2003. Footnote 16. Ito and Lapavitsas, 1999, attempt to refute the arguments expressed by Ray, 1990, and the evidence for state and credit theories in general, in order to add credence their own approach. They provide some thought-provoking analysis, but ultimately, from our perspective, their arguments remain wholly unconvincing and, importantly, are not in accord with the evidence. End footnote. At this stage, a more detailed examination of the nature and importance of barter is required in order to shed light upon the Marxian version of the origins of money. An anthropological perspective is provided by Chapman, 1980. Quote, barter is not embedded in society. It stands out by itself as a purely economic transaction. What then is its role in history, in process? If barter is not an institution, it might be termed a cultural or behavioral pattern. End quote. Chapman, 1980. Footnote 17. In describing barter in this way, Chapman is establishing a universal mode model of barter, suggesting that barter as an ideal type is not embedded in society. Humphrey and Hugh Jones, 1992. Chapman states that in her study she postulates pure barter as a logical category which, as such, exists only in theory, only abstractly. The model is not applicable to or representative of any given case of real impure barter. In the world, barter is a transaction between two living human beings, or groups. It always occurs in a social or psychological situation. The context, however, never or rarely distorts the prime motivation of the act of barter, which is the exchange of objects. The contexts, too numerous to define, presuppose two individuals or groups who need or desire to acquire each other's objects. Chapman, 1980. End footnote. Importantly, Chapman stresses that barter is a behavior pattern that is separate from money and exists in all societies. Quote, barter exists with or without money. End quote. Chapman, 1980. Chapman notes the apparent existence of barter in all types of societies. However, in capitalism it is marginal, with the exception of periods of crisis. Chapman, 1980. Crucially, barter should not be understood as a forerunner of money. Chapman's 1980 assessment of Marx's explanation of the exegesis of money is in broad agreement with that of Lapavitsas, 2003. Quote, Marx states that exchange originated in the context of trade of products, having use values between two communities on their shared border, and that, as the volume of trade increased, the products were transformed from objects having use value, a concept which here includes direct labor, into objects having value, abstract labor time, as well as use value. The labor necessary to produce the object has now passed from the use value concept to the value concept. In this process of the transformation of products into commodities, money first emerges as the measure of the exchange value of the commodities. The causal incidence of this momentous development is the result of exchange between communities, that is, not an internal transformation in the mode of production within the community or communities involved. Chapman, 1980. End quote. Anthropologists Humphrey and Hugh Jones, 1992, support this interpretation of Marx's views of barter and add insight to it. Quote, the idea that barter is beyond society was clearly expressed by Marx in Capital, Volume 1, 1954, where he opposed barter to transactions within society and based on communal property rights. He located the origin of barter in exchanges between primitive societies on the grounds that only in the absence of communal rights to property was it possible for people to alienate their goods. Marx went on immediately to add that as soon as people got the idea of alienated exchange of goods, this spread inside society too, because of man's inherent desire for individual acquisition. End quote. Humphrey and Hugh Jones, 1992. Chapman develops her analysis by specifying 4 causal factors in Marx's theory of direct exchange. Quote, number 1, accident or chance. 2, events exterior to the community. 3, gradual increase in exchange or trade. 4, creation of surplus products. These factors are axiomatic. They are given, assumed as reasonable, and illustrated by random examples from pre-capitalist societies. End quote. Chapman, 1980. Chapman then comments on each in turn. Quote, Number 1. By proposing the genesis and early development of barter, and of exchange in general, as accidental, Marx assumes that it is not the result of any process, that it might have happened or not. Therefore, this factor cannot be structured into a theory of this nature. 2. By situating the origin and initial development of exchange as exterior to the community, Marx implies that in its origin, the process is not the result of or part of forces which operate in terms of dialectic relations. 3. By describing the process which leads to the transformation of primitive society due to the insertion of commodity production in it as gradual, further analysis is eluded in this context. 4. What is surplus product? Surplus over and above what? Assuming that a normal or average consumption can be determined for a given society, the surplus is the amount of products exceeding it. Among some hunting, fishing, and gathering people, for instance, food which is set aside for future consumption is not necessarily bartered or exchanged. End quote. Chapman, 1980. Chapman then provides a range of examples of surplus and places them in specific societal contexts before concluding, quote, the creation of surplus may be due to such various types of economic behavior that surplus of itself cannot be assumed to represent a given causal factor. End quote. Chapman, 1980. Chapman goes on to argue that Marx's story of the origin of the commodity is strangely incongruous with the rest of his analysis. The causal factors Marx brings into play in his theory of direct exchange and the origin of the commodity are amazingly weak and strangely contradictory to the theory of history, historical materialism, he applied to capitalism and so resolutely defended. End quote. Chapman, 1980. Having considered the key arguments contained in the literature, it seems reasonable to suggest that the credit-debt relationship existing within society forms the basis for the development of money as a social institution. Barter, however, although it might exist, is not embedded within societies as a foundational social phenomenon. No society has yet been found with an economy based upon barter. Humphrey and Hugh Jones, 1992. Rather, barter comes into its own when foreignness, Lapavitsas, 2003, is significant. It is therefore important when trade occurs between communities, although it does still occur within communities. It is an appropriate way of allowing spot transactions to occur between the representatives of different social groups. The nature and history of barter are separate from the nature and history of money. Barter trades and monetary transactions apply in different situations. The key element is that distinguishes the nature of barter from that of money is that barter involves only two parties in the exchange, whereas a monetary transaction, in contrast, involves three. When a purchase is made, the buyer provides the seller with a credit on a third party. This credit is money. There is no money in direct exchange. Barter cannot provide the origins of money, although it seems that barter exists alongside money.